Welcome to the screencast for the Web 2 module. We're going to be looking at some CSS, and we're going to be doing the project, a little bit of the project here. I'll show you some of how the CSS is going to work. So I've downloaded already the Web Level 2 project, the zip file from Canvas, and I have it here in my, well, it's still in my downloads folder. But I can open the index.html and the style.css in brackets. And I've actually gone through and removed the code from the CSS because I like to start from scratch. And I'll start with my char set. Basically what I like to do when I'm working with CSS is I like to reference the HTML. So that's why I have this bracket set to split screen. I have the CSS on the right, the HTML on the left. And I will go through the HTML, and basically I start at the top and work my way down. I'm not going to do everything on here simply for time, but I will go through some of the major things that are necessary for this project. So basically I'm going to start with the body, and body is where I generally set the global things like font family, font size, colors for fonts, that kind of thing. In the process of doing that, I'm going to probably use a font face rule, or actually Google Font might make more sense. You could use either one. I have a font face selected, or I don't have a font face selected. I need to select a font face from Google Fonts. And in doing that, I'm going to say maybe pick two, and I'll use a serif and a sans serif, and then something a little more fancy for the headline, kind of like Sedgwick. So then once I have those selected, I can go to my import, and I can just copy the import URL code into my, that's a CSS import rule. So actually I put this above body. Then when I want to actually apply it, I can use this rule, this bit of code down here. So in my body element, my body rule, I simply put that. And then I can do like font size. We'll do 16 pixels. I can set my font color. I generally like to get a named color first, and then I modify. So I get a color in, and then I can go to right click and quick edit, and then from here you can modify, and I can set it to an RGB color. I'll just leave it there. That's a good color. It's a light blue. Then I have to set my background color to something dark. So we're gonna do like slate, some sort of dark slate gray would be cool. Again, I don't like to leave named elements. We'll maybe change the hue of this a little bit, make it a little more bluish. We're kind of going with a blue theme here. That looks good. I can use RGB codes, I can use name colors, I can use hex codes. I just like to be consistent, so whatever codes I start using for my colors, I want to use the same codes throughout. I like to be switching back and forth between hex codes and RGB and named colors. That's just annoying. And it's also annoying for anyone else who comes to work on this, because consistency is helpful for other people coming to maintain your site after it's been built. So what I will do, and at this point I can simply save this. I can go back to my index.html, and actually I just opened it in a new tab. Pull it in there. So this is what I have so far. I have a bluish background, I have white text, I have pretty much nothing else. Font family's been set. So what I can do is I start going down through my CSS then. Okay, I want to do maybe, let's start with the header. So there's a header element. Maybe I can set font family here to the this one. So Sedgwick, if I copy that, I go back, I paste it in, I say, what I generally do is I'll keep the page open and then just do save and reloads. That looks cool. It's too small though. Let's make it 300%, $300, 300%. So that's 3 times larger. That's not bad. Maybe what I'll do is stick a separator in here and do the header H1 at 300%. And then header H2 at 200%. So I'm sort of changing, and I'm using percent because I've set the font size up here, and this is now based on that 16 pixels. So my font size is based on a 16 pixel base. That's not so bad. That's better. Maybe up here, text align center would be useful to do. There we go. So now I've got centered text in a different font. It's kind of cool. What else am I gonna? I need to do columns in here. Let's kind of walk through some of the big things that you want to work on. The menus might be a little bit big. The columns are going to be a big thing. The background image is probably going to be something that's tricky. I've already got the fonts in there. I've already got some background color, but I want to add a background image in somewhere. So maybe what I'll do is add that into the header. And I have an image. I'm just going to grab one here. This is a fun image. We'll put that in. What I'm going to do is I'm going to create a folder in my web folder and call it images. I'm going to move that in there because everything has to be relationally located. So I'm going to use NSAC hero. We're going to copy that into images. So what I'm going to do in the header, background image is going to be a URL. And the nice thing about brackets is, as I'm doing this, it's a little bit smart. It knows its surroundings a little bit, and it can say, okay, there's a folder called images. In that folder, there's an image called NSAC hero JPEG. I will select that. Then I have a few other options for background. I can do background position. I could do center aligned, top aligned, left aligned. I could do top center. I could do left center. I could do different types of alignments. I could do background repeat. I don't want it to repeat. I just want a single background. And I can do something like background size. We'll do cover. Just cover basically fills the space. So I save that. I reload. Oops, I go to my browser. I reload. And it looks kind of, yeah, maybe my header needs some padding. We could set padding to like 50 pixels top and bottom, 0 left and right. We could do margin at 0. There, that's a little better. Still not quite right. I can use percentages in here, so like maybe we could do 60% as the background position, see what that does. That goes the wrong direction, so maybe 30%. There, because I want to see faces. Maybe 25. So I've centered it left and right, and I can set the top and bottom to 25%. That's kind of cool. I think something else I want to do in body is get rid of the margin. There we go. So then I've got no blue edges. And now I can see, I can't read my text very well, so I'm just going to go make a fix there. So we'll make our header H1. Actually, we can do this in header. Color, we'll make it a dark. Let's actually match the color from our background. So we have some, reusing colors is always a good idea. We go back and reload from the browser. That's even difficult to read. So maybe what we do instead is a think I can do a text shadow. So here's something, if you want to know how to do something and you're not quite sure what the CSS rule is for it, you know, if occasionally I still have this problem, you can, and yeah, it's text shadow, that's what I'm looking for. You can just literally Google what you think you can do or you think you want to do plus CSS, and generally the top result is going to be just that. So I use text shadow, and then I can tell it offset, like 2 pixel offset, and I think the second value is going to be vertical offsets, horizontal offset, and then radius. I can do a radius like blur. So I could do 2 pixels vertical, 2 pixels horizontal, and then like a 3 pixel radial blur or radius on the blur. I save that, I go back and reload. That's a little easier to read. So maybe I could just do like 1, 1. So I can kind of play with that. It's just sort of a numbers game. Trying it out, seeing what happens. Now this is like a blue shadow. It's a little easier to read than it was without. It's not a very good font. I probably could have chosen a better font to go with that. But again, that's a style design choice that you probably can evaluate and make on your own. The next thing I possibly want to do is look at, maybe I need to do some columns, and my text is touching the edge down here, so I probably need to do something about that. So then I have an element down here with a class of main. So I call that up .main. I can do something like margin 0 auto. What this does is there is no center on an object. There is text align center, but that doesn't work with objects. So if I want to center something on the page, actually, let's do it. Yeah, we can do text align. So if I want to center something on the page, there's sort of a workaround to auto, which basically equalizes the left and right margins. So I set my width to maybe like 90%. Then my left and right margins are going to be equalized in that auto margin, which is going to give me a centered bit of content there. And I probably need to do that with this content up here, which I think is summary and preamble. So I can add those. So if I use commas to add selectors, in this case I have 3 class selectors that I'm putting into one rule. So I can set all 3 of those, and then I have a whole, and then I probably need to do, well, this isn't the menu, so I may do something completely different with that. But I've kind of given them some margin on the left and right, and maybe 90% is too much. Maybe we do 95%, so a little bit less margin. That's better. That just makes it so they're not touching the edges of my browser, which is hard to read. So now, then I want to do columns. So we're going to try and figure out, I think the best place to break things into columns is this main area. And my main contains this requirements, benefits, participation, all these divs, explanation. These are all things that are, there's the end of my main element. So there's like 4 columns in there. So what I want to do, and I'm going to use something called Flexbox for this. There's a guide to Flexbox. This is linked into the project instructions. Basically, Flexbox revolves around 2 sets of properties. One for the parent and one set for the children. And for the most part, I'm going to use the parent properties. I'll probably use 1 or 2 of the children properties, but for the most part, I just set the parent properties up, and then the columns create themselves in a sense. So main is my element name. So that's this right here. And I want to just kind of go down this list. So display is the first one. Obviously, I want to display as flex. and get the right thing in there. Flex direction, the default is row. That's what I want, so I can leave that alone. Flex wrap, the default is no wrap, but I do, in case something doesn't fit, want it to wrap. So I want it to wrap, and just in case something, otherwise it'll push something off the right side of the page. I have to scroll to the right to see it. Justify content, probably not necessary in this, and I'm not really going to add space. I'm just going to make the columns fill the space. Align items, I want to generally align items to stretch. What that does is that sets the top and the bottom of each column to be the same. So no matter what the content is, my column heights are going to be the same. That's kind of useful when you're aligning content. I don't really need to align the content within the main so that's about it. Those three things are going to set up my parent. And then within my parent, the elements, the direct children, so the divs in this case, div of here, this div, that div, are direct children of the main. Those are going to be the objects that become columns. Now, what I can do is make sure to save this, and then once I reload, I just need to start defining widths. Because what I probably didn't do, yeah, I can do some widths. So then what I would do is I would do main space div, so that's saying divs inside of main with, let's do 50%. We'll do 2 columns. So 50 and 50 is 100. Let's actually add some things to it. Box sizing is going to change my dimensions to the width measuring the box of content plus the border instead of just the content itself. So that way I can add some padding of 0, maybe 5 pixels padding in there to just give it some space within the columns itself. So we'll save that. We will reload. Now I have 2 columns, 4 elements and 2 columns. Now they're funny because this is too short. So maybe what I want to do is reorder these, so I have what's this about and benefits next to each other, and then participation and requirements can be next to each other. And you'll notice the very first properties for children are order. So I can do order. So if I do dot explanation, which is my first div class here, I can set that to number 1. I can do, I'll just copy this and do it 3 more times. So then my second one is participation. I will make that order 3. So that's saying this is the third one. Benefits, I will make 2. And then the last one is requirements. And that one's going to be number 4. So this is basically taking the order that I have and saying, okay, I'm going to set a new order. So this is number 1, this is number 2, this is number 3, number 4. So when I save that and I go back and reload, now you'll watch carefully, I've got what's this about and participation in 1 row, and then benefits and requirements in a row. Once I reload this, now I've got what's this about and benefits are, so this is number 1, this is number 2, this is number 3, and this is number 4. That's the order that I've reset these to. So I'm using columns, and I'm using Flexbox to create the columns, and I'm using the order, which is inherent in Flexbox, to reorder them so they fit a little bit better together. That looks better. So the next thing I want to do is format the menu. This menu is a little tricky to format, but you still have similar structure to most site menus. There's just that this one is at the bottom of the page instead of at the top of the page. It's fine. There's still a nav element, there's still a list, and all of the menu options are list items, although there are multiple anchor links within each one, so I can't necessarily create buttons, but we'll give it a shot and see what it comes up looking like. There's also a secondary nav, which is another nav element with another list. There's a tertiary nav, which doesn't have a nav element, just a list of basically just a list of links. So we've got primary, secondary, tertiary for terms of hierarchy. So to start out, I essentially am, again, referencing my HTML. I've got class names to reference. I've got elements to reference. I've got a nav here. I've got multiple navs, so I want to be aware of if I do something to one nav, it's going to do something to the other nav, so I may need to get more specific. So I can do something like, we'll do, let's see, design selection. So design selection is a div that contains the primary nav. So in my CSS, I will have to get specific to say nav within design selection. That's what this order of selectors represents. So then what I can do is I can tell it maybe we'll do width of 100%. Now, here's another time where you might play with some things and see what it looks like. You might come in with a preset idea of what the preconceived idea of how this is going to look. It's kind of up to you how you want to do it. I think maybe what I'll do is make this into a bar across the page at the bottom and go from there. So background color, we'll make it, well, let's go with our Alice Blue. We'll make it, remember the quick edit trick to make it an RGBA color. By the way, RGBA, A is a fourth value that you would add to this, and I'm actually going to go ahead and do this just to show you what it does. A stands for alpha. So RGBA adds a fourth value, which is a transparency value. So we're going to say 0.75. So this is 75% opaque. And we're going to stop there just to see what it looks like. So there we go. It's not quite pure white. You can see it still stands out a little bit. The white text stands out a little bit. So it's if I drop this down to like 50% opacity and see what it does. Now, so you can see now I've got a transparent color, which is actually very useful for when I want to sort of integrate things a little bit better or a little bit more and start playing with tints and shades of colors. I can use transparency within the color itself. And if I wanted to get really fancy with it, I could even use gradients and then all kinds of things as the backgrounds. I will probably not do that in this round because we're not going to get that advanced. But I do want to simplify the menu, make them basically buttons. So what I will start with is my design, selection, nav. I also need to add in, there is a UL. So to start with, my UL is going to be list style type, set that to none. That gets rid of the bullets. And I will save and reload each one of these to just show you. So I've gotten rid of bullets. Don't want bullets on everything. I can use Flexbox on this if I wanted to. Maybe I'll not do that for this. We'll do design selection nav li. So now we have list items, and the list items are going to display inline. We can start with inline. We may do inline block depending on how. Let's just do inline block. Probably is the most. So then it makes inline makes them all line up like a paragraph text. That makes them a little bit hard because now I've got this and this. That's a little tricky. So what we might need to do is give them some padding. Actually, let's try this. Let's make it background color, and we'll do, let's pick a color. Let's go with Alice Blue, or again, right click, quick edit, change it to RGB, and then click OK. So we'll add some padding to this and save and reload. So now it looks okay. We may need to, obviously the text is not so good, so we'll do, oops, what happened? Where is our, this blue? So I want to do that blue for text. There we go. Now we can read the by again in the middle. Again, you know, contrast is important, so design does play a significant role. We could do border. Let's try, now border by itself is a shortcut sort of way. I can add multiple values in here, so I can set it to 1 pixel width. I can set it to solid. I can set a color, and I'm going to do the same color just for fun. We're going to add, you know, not much variety. So now I've got a little border. Then I can do, let's try something fun. Border radius. It's going to round the corners, so let's just do 5 pixels of radius. That rounds the corners. Now I got a little more buttony looking things. That's actually not padding. Let's do margin. I already have padding. Let's do 5 pixels of margin. Just give it some space. So now they've got some space. The cool thing about doing something like this is now I have everything's still flexible. Like these buttons will flex and realign themselves. By the way, there's a footer here that I could modify also if I wanted to, which probably you should. And anyway, so there is all that. Then, boy, why is this so far? Keeps getting pushed way out there for some reason. I wonder if I get rid of this, what will happen? Oh, same thing. All right. I don't know what's going on with this. Anyhow, I will close that. Oh, maybe that's why. Yes, it's because it didn't. If you miss the closing bracket, your CSS might get screwed up. Next up, what else do I want to do? Let's do, just for fun, you can do box shadow, which is kind of an interesting. You can do drop shadow, so 2 pixels. Again, sort of like the, where was it? Text shadow, I can set vertical and horizontal offset. I can set a blur radius. So 2 pixels vertical offset, 2 pixels horizontal offset, 1 pixel radius, and a color. So for fun, let's do our blue-ish, dark blue. That gives us a little bit of a, that's cool. Now, I can, and I want to do this probably sooner than later. All my anchors are still default colors. So I can do anchor : link, anchor : active, a : visited in one rule, because I don't really want all those to be. So the 4 states that the link can exist in are link, active, visited, and hover. Let me pull this up. So these are pseudo classes, and if I look pseudo classes up in the CSS, you can see now I have a : link, a : visit, a : hover, a : active. Those are the 4 states that a link can exist in. So our unvisited link is red, our visited link is green. So if I click it and I go back, now it's green. Hover is pink. Active is when you're clicking on it. So active is when I've actually got the mouse button down on it. That's blue. So that's your control of the 4 states of a link. Now you can put those states over other elements too. It's not a very good idea to put those states over things that aren't links, because especially hover indicates something clickable normally to most users. So what I could do is I could put it on my list item, because that's where I've got all these things, which I might end up actually doing. We'll see. But I'm just going to modify the color of the text itself, because this blue is default. And if I click it, it's turning red on active. And purple is going to be my visited. So there's my visited. If I come, oops, I just have to reopen that. And I just open it in Chrome. Don't want Chrome. Let's try this again. Here we go. See, now that one's purple because I visited it. These are purple because I've been here before. And click those links. I want to change that. So my A color link. So I'm just going to put a color in there, and we're going to make them, let's just make them the same color as our text. And what we'll do is I'll go to quick edit, make it RGB, and then what I'll do is add A colon hover. So the hover will be the only one that's different. I don't really like my actives to be different than, well, active is kind of fun because you can make it do fun, quirky things. You can play with these four pseudo selectors and make them do kind of cool. It's like a little detail, like almost, that you can control with your website, which is kind of fun. On the hover, we're going to make them do something else, though. Color is going to go to, let's just pick a color. So we'll make it maybe just get a little darker. So darker would be this direction here. So somewhere in that range, we'll make it RGB. And close, save, reload. Now they're that color, but when I hover, okay, now I've got some confusion between my dotted lines under abbreviations, but you can see the hover, that they change now to, and the same over here. I probably want to change that. That's probably what I want to do next. So in my, so design, just anchors within there. I'm going to make color of, we're going to go back to this color. This is our blue. And then save, reload. There we go. So the problem I have now is within these buttons, I actually have 2 links for each button. So I can't exactly make the button itself change, because that indicates that this whole thing might be clickable when it's not. Just these things are clickable. So with that in mind, I'll make this hover do something a little bit different. So we'll copy this. I like to copy paste as much as possible. Oops, not cut. Cut, copy, paste, and we'll make the wrong thing. It would help if I click the right part there. So we'll make it just get lighter. We'll make it go this direction. Actually, what we could do is make it the same color as that. Let's do that. So we copy that, save, reload. Now, didn't work. Oh, nav A colon hover. I have to add the pseudo selector in there in order for this to work. That's a very subtle change. Perhaps we need to go more obvious. Let's try it that way. There we go. That's a more obvious change. All right. Okay, so that is some of the basics that you're going to need to know how to do. Now, you may not want to make this necessarily your menu. You could turn this in the footer into your menu. I would recommend coming up with a little bit of a plan before you start this. Get an idea of what you want it to look like. Maybe even sketch a few wireframes to get the layout how you want it. Pick some colors. Pick a color theme. That's my biggest recommendation, is pick like 3 or 4 colors that really make the theme that go. I just picked colors on the fly, but if you have preset colors that you can pick from to make your theme, that does help. And always, if there are any questions, please bring your stuff, bring your project into the lab and ask any of us that are good with web for help and assistance on this project. We'd be more than happy to show you whatever you need to know to get this finished up. All right, good luck. Thanks for watching.